And now for more on this, we're being joined by Edward P. Joseph, conflict management expert with 15 years of field experience, as well as a foreign policy lecturer and analyst. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, sir. Always a pleasure to have you.
Good to be with you.
Now, sir, of course, to begin with, as I mentioned, negotiators expected to reconvene in Cairo today for truce talks, while some reports do say that Tel Aviv says that it will not send its delegates until Hamas releases a full list of hostages. What's your assessment of where things stand at the moment, and if Israel can effectively secure the release of all hostages?
Well, based on what U.S. officials are saying, it appears that actually Israel has accepted the deal. And the terms that I'm reading, the latest reports in the New York Times say, quote, the ball is in Hamas's court. So apparently the Israelis have accepted the framework put forward by the United States with the assistance of Qatar and Egypt. And that the terms of that deal provide for a 6-week ceasefire. And that's quite significant. And obviously, given the conditions and the suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, the question is, why would the Hamas leadership not accept this arrangement that, again, is apparently supported by Qatar and Egypt as well? So that's really the question, is whether the Hamas leadership cares about the Palestinian civilians or is more concerned about preserving its own positions there in Gaza. Please.
Absolutely, sir. Now, if we are to talk about the contours of this agreement, it says that it will begin immediately if Hamas agrees to release the most vulnerable hostages. However, as I mentioned earlier, Hamas has not yet agreed to a defined category of vulnerable hostages. Now, what's your take on the wording of this?
Again, it's bizarre. Here we have, as your report shows, the Palestinian civilians that Hamas purports to represent desperately, look at their desperate condition, rushing after humanitarian assistance there in such desperate straits. What leadership, what kind of leadership of these people would be so unconcerned and insensitive to the needs, the real needs of the civilian population, not just for food, but for safety, to have a ceasefire so that hospitals can function properly and that civilians do not get killed in this war. So that's really the puzzle. Why make an issue of over some technical category of whether a hostage is vulnerable? Not what is clear here is we have to ask the question this: why did Hamas seize the hostages in the first place? Clearly, it was not to protect Palestinians. It was to protect Hamas leadership itself, and that's what's carrying out here. Again, we have the backing of Qatar and Egypt, along with the United States, for the terms that apparently Israel has accepted. So that's really the puzzling question here, is exactly why Hamas is bickering over details like which category of hostages. Please.
Right. Now, of course, the United States has also airdropped aid into Gaza. This move, which has drawn the ire of many Republicans as well. What's your take on this? Of course, this move also comes after over 100 Palestinians were killed while scrambling for aid packages in Gaza.
Well, I think the criticism from Republicans on this doesn't matter at all to President Biden. He's very concerned, as is Secretary of State Blinken, about the situation of Palestinian civilians. And President Biden is trying to address, at least in some fashion, through the airdrops. Now, of course, airdrops cannot compensate for the loss of ground access, and that's really a concern. It's that the major aid agencies, including, as your report indicated, World Food Program, along with others, have stopped going into Gaza. And that aid convoy, the tragic one that led to so many Palestinian civilians getting killed tragically, this was an effort between Israel and Palestinian businessmen. That was who was the agreement, and there had actually been prior convoys that had been successful. But clearly, the Israeli army is not equipped, trained to escort in, and what's needed here, desperately needed here, are alternative solutions to get security, private security, into Gaza that can escort safely, establish a bridge, a humanitarian bridge, so that aid can get in the quantities that the Palestinian civilians desperately need. Please.
All right. Well, Professor Edward P. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights on this.
You're welcome.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.